Africa Business News, proudly sponsored by EY.
Coming up on Africa Business News, Kenya marks the one-year anniversary of the Westgate mall attacks. Lagos declared Ebola-free. And in Southern Africa, Transnet streamlines cargo flow with a joint venture. Stay tuned.
Africa, it is huge, it is diverse, and its business landscape fascinating and dynamic. And that's our business here on your favorite weekly African business stop. We're joined by Beatrice Kachenge in Nairobi, Didi Akinilure in Lagos, and we'll hear from Christine Mundwa here in Johannesburg. My name is Victor Kgomoeswana, and this is the Africa Business News. Beatrice Mambo, there's no bigger story than Westgate remembered in Kenya this week. Tell us about it.
Well, yes, that's right, Victor. Kenya commemorated the first year anniversary after the Westgate mall attack, and that left about 60 people dead. Now, various events were held in the capital, but there's one key thing that for me stood out is that the government applauding the United States for its airstrike in Somalia earlier in the month. And they did kill the leader of the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, and he was believed to have orchestrated the Westgate attack. And in the words of President Uhuru Kenyatta, now the healing process can begin for the country. But with regards to the businesses, Victor, which you did ask, well, some are yet to recover. And as I understand, human trafficking in shopping malls has actually dropped by about 35% to about 260,000 per month. And this, of course, is after the Westgate attack. But we are hoping that this will recover. And of course, this is not it's not good news for the tenants who are paying top dollar for the prime properties.
Obviously, Beatrice, the banks in Uganda are not as attractive as they are in Kenya. $77 million written off in bad loans.
Well, yes, the Ugandan banking sector has been struggling, and of course also you've seen the quality of loans in Uganda. They have been deteriorating the last 2 years. Now, there are a number of reasons for this, and of course the big one is the high interest rate environment. And obviously one is when the economy is depressed, that means that it affects the ability of borrowers to actually pay their loans. But as you mentioned, Didi, commercial banks in Uganda have actually written off about 206 billion Ugandan shillings as bad debts in 2013.
And Beatrice, who is Chiru Mirungu, and why would Nestle appoint her to head their operations in so many countries? Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan.
Victor, before I tell you who she is, this is a very big win for local talent, and particularly for women, shattering the proverbial glass ceiling. Now, Shiro became the first local manager for the East African business of the Swiss-based Nestle, and she has a 15 years experience in fast-moving consumer goods, and she was recently from GlaxoSmithKline. And of course, we're wishing her all the best, and hopefully we'll be able to see such more appointments going forward.
Beatrice, we were glued to our screens last week during the East African leg of the All Africa Business Leaders Award in Kenya. Congratulations on successfully hosting such a prestigious event. How did it go from your side?
Well, I might say it went very well, and it was good to see Tanzanian billionaire Dr. Reginald Mengi. He is executive chairman of IPP. He was the biggest winner of the ABLAs. Now, he took home 2 awards, and that is the Business Leader of the Year award and also the Lifetime Achievement Award for the East African region. Of course, this is the first that we are seeing for ABLA. Now, the next event will be the South African leg, which will be on the 2nd of October. And of course, Didi, we are looking forward to the West African leg, which will be on the 23rd of October.
Asante sana, Beatrice Kachenge out of Nairobi. We check into Southern Africa now, where we talk to Christine Mundwa. Christine, you're fresh from Mozambique. Tell us about what's been happening out there.
Definitely. I arrived yesterday. Victor, state-owned railway operators from South Africa, Mozambique and Swaziland launched what is called a joint operations center. Now, essentially what this means is that under one roof will sit railway operators from all 3 countries. And the idea is that by having them all under one roof, they're able to communicate more effectively, which will enhance the train movements in the Maputo corridor.
Well, which would be a great news for the mining industry. We saw Vale struggling with some of the movement of its cargo from the mines to to the ports. So this is the kind of infrastructural cooperation we need in the Southern African region, and I must add, in the entire African continent. But back in South Africa here, we saw last week the Reserve Bank keeping its rates unchanged, but most of all, the big gun at the head of the Reserve Bank quitting. What do you make of that?
Well, a lot of speculation has been fueled by the way the announcement came. Of course, a journalist asked the Reserve Bank Governor, Joe Marcus, about her future at the bank. At that time, she then made the announcement that she will be stepping down in November and not taking on another term. But if we look at it, she is 65. That is retirement age. So maybe that's just what's behind it. But for continuity purposes, I think that the sentiment is that one of her deputies should succeed her. And we know that we're talking about either Mr. Daniel Minele or Mr. Lisecha Khanyayo.
But who's your money on? Khanyayo or Minele?
Khanyayo, I have to go with.
Definitely?
Definitely.
Okay, we'll see about that. But now tell me about this story. We saw Zimbabwe going to the Chinese for its power and investment not so long ago. South Africans going to the Russians about nuclear energy. And we know nuclear energy is clean until it's not so clean, as we saw in Japan.
Yes, Victor, a $9 billion treaty has been signed between South Africa and Russia in the nuclear gas developments in South Africa.
Well, now tell me about Angola and Namibia. You know what we don't realize is now Angola and Namibia are both diamond producers. We saw Angola saying they are returning to diamond polishing. And now this collaboration between them that was signed yesterday, the monetary banks, what is it, the central banks collaborating. What is that story all about? Okay,
so the two central banks have signed a two-way currency conversion deal. Now, practically what this means is that if you go to any bureau de change, if you go to any bank or any sort of authorized agency within Namibia, or within Angola, you will be able to directly exchange the two currencies. Now, this, of course, will make doing business between the countries much easier, and the central banks on a daily basis will be publishing the benchmark rates.
Well, let's hope that it will open the channel between Namibia and Angola, and as a result, between Angola and South Africa, because of the connection in the region. Thanks, Christine. We check into West Africa now and talk to Didi Akinelure. Didi, before we talk about the business stories of the week, what is the construction industry likely to do in Nigeria after the catastrophic collapse of the building where Pastor TB Joshua was? Is it the government of Nigeria that's going to have to do something about this to tighten controls? Because I remember not so long ago seeing a lot of buildings being condemned for not being up to scratch. Is there any coordinated action in the industry and among the government circles to deal with this kind of catastrophe?
Yes, Victor. To update viewers first, a building serving as the guest house of a popular Lagos church collapsed last week, killing 115 people. Now, the majority of the deceased were South African nationals. The collapse is said to have occurred because 3 extra stories were being added to the existing 2 of the guest house. It's quite interesting that this is happening at a time where there's been some controversy over the misapplication and misuse of the lower grade 32.5 grade cement. We have, of course, seen companies like Dangote Cement announcing plans to push out higher grade 52.5 cement into the market. Now, while it has not been confirmed that the misuse of low-grade cement is responsible for the collapse of the building, it is possible that this incident will once again bring up the matter. And besides that, we are hearing that Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan plans to meet with 36 state governors in order to make a policy decision in respect of erecting high-rise buildings across the country.
Well, let's hope that leads to something much more constructive, because we can't afford Africa's largest economy suffering from such headlines. But back to West Africa's long-running battle with Ebola. Please update us on the situation. Hopefully some good news after all the damage.
I am happy to confirm that the Lagos state government has declared the state free of the Ebola virus. Now, this, of course, means that we no longer have any cases of the virus in the state. In actual fact, there are no more confirmed cases in the country as a whole. All the suspected cases in Lagos have been cleared. However, in Rivers State, there are still cases of people being observed for the 21-day incubation period of the virus. Now, despite this good news here in Lagos, the government has shifted the resumption date for public and private schools from September 22nd to the 8th of October. The additional 2 weeks of holiday will allow the state government to put in place all necessary precautionary measures against the virus in our schools.
Well, we still are not going to let this Ebola story go because international cocoa prices reached a 3-year high last week, pointing to the impact of the epidemic, but showing that even countries like Ivory Coast that are cocoa producers are going to be affected because they share a border with these 3 countries of West Africa. Didi.
Yes, cocoa prices went up 6.3% last week, largely due to concerns that the outbreak could reach Cote d'Ivoire or Ghana, the 2 countries which, of course, produce 60% of the world's cocoa.
What have you heard about Orji Usogalu and the Slock Group? This man could be, and his company, of course, a game changer in Nigeria and the mobile telephony business.
Absolutely. The Slock Group has a strong presence in West Africa, focusing on everything from the oil and gas, banking and finance sectors to media, real estate, manufacturing, and the tourism space. We also hear that the company has plans to launch an affordable Nigerian-made smart mobile phone into the local Asian and African market. So it looks like Nigeria is set to hit another goal in the telecom sector.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to ask Beatrice and Didi to take their favorite stock in the region. Last week, both ladies picked banks. You picked Equity Bank, Beatrice, and I can't remember, maybe it was First Bank of Nigeria in West Africa. What is your favorite stock this week? If I said I want to invest some money, which stock would you choose and why?
Victor, this week I will go with Centum Investment. Now, I had an interview with the CEO last week, James Moria, and they're very well diversified, and that, of course, is the winner. Now, they're constructing the biggest shopping mall in Kenya, which has about 670 square feet of lettable space, and they already have 45% of that already leased out, and this is a year before they actually open. Now, some of the major international brands will debut in the region in that particular mall. Besides that, they were part of the consortium that won a tender to construct about 1,000 megawatts of a coal-fired power plant. There is my stock pick.
And if you haven't heard of Centum, Google the man called Chris Kirubi. You'll know a lot more about it. Let's see about Didi in West Africa.
I would go with a Forte Oil because even though that stock has gained 142% this year, we are hearing that the company is in talks with a downstream company with the intention to acquire its assets. So, of course, all of that is likely to boost that company's stock going forward.
As we wrap up this week's show, I ask again the Africa Business News team on the trivia question of the week. Didi and Beatrice, actually I'm going to ask Beatrice on this one. September 24th is a public holiday in 2 countries. The easier of the 2 is that it is Heritage Day in South Africa, but which West African country celebrates its independence on the same day? Beatrice?
Victor, I'll take a shot and say Guinea-Bissau.
Are your shots always this accurate? Guinea-Bissau, of course, not to be confused with Guinea-Conakry, that is the home of one of Africa's eminent scholars and pioneers, Amilcar Cabral. Look him up if you don't know him. Guinea-Bissau unilaterally declared independence from Portugal on September 24th in 1973, although that was only recognized on September 10th the following year. This agriculture-based economy in West Africa, Portuguese-speaking, of course, and not French-speaking as Guinea-Conakry is, relies mainly on fishing, nuts and cashew nuts for its exports. Happy Independence Day to Guinea-Bissau and Heritage Day to South Africa. That brings an end to our show this week. Beatrice Kachenge out of Nairobi, Didi Akinyelure in Lagos, and earlier on, Christine Mundo here in Johannesburg gave us her insights. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa. We are back with you next week with more Africa business news. Until next week, as we would say in South Africa, tot ziens.